So this is Taco. He's owned by my friend and my client Claire. He's an Andalusian stallion. He's in his teens, I believe 14, 15, 16, something like this. And hooves have always been a problem for him. I've been working with him for about a year, but due to his location, I've been unable to get to him on a 3-week trimming cycle, which is what I would prefer. And he's been on a 6-week trim cycle, 5-6 week trim cycle. There was one time when he did go 10 weeks without a trim when I was moving homes, but there's not much I can do about that at this time. Claire, his owner, has plans to bring him home, not far from where I'm living actually. So that's why I am remaining and keeping him and Claire in my routine, because he won't be forever a 3-hour drive from my home. She has 3 horses in this location, and it's an excellent livery facility run by a South African woman who grew up in Spain, who's a tremendous horsewoman, and she gives them first-class care. I never have to worry that the hooves are going to be dirty or thrushy or not looked after when I go there. And Taco here has suffered from chronic thrush for most of his life. He has lived the life that many stallions live, and he's been in livery arrangements and in the UK before he came to Spain about a year ago. We have total caudal hoof failure. So the heels, we have contracted heels, we have an atrophied frog, and we have lack of digital cushion, a problem with sole depth, very long toes. It wouldn't surprise me that he could, if he hasn't already, develop navicular symptoms, meaning not just the navicular bone, but any kind of dysfunction in the caudal hoof will be a navicular syndrome. So that wouldn't surprise me. So I'm documenting this entire trim. Took about an hour, and I'm editing out any of the messy parts when he shifts around and I have to move the camera. That's when I'll edit everything. Otherwise, my goal is that you can see exactly what I'm doing here. His hooves, I often describe them like, imagine someone who's spent their life in a wheelchair and what their legs would look like then. The atrophy in the legs. His hooves remind me of this, especially in terms of the frog. He just hasn't used his hooves in his lifetime, and when he did use them, maybe it wasn't enough. It can also be genetic. Genetics can predispose horses to this sort of arrangement. I know a 4-year-old who has never had shoes on, who has developed contracted heels like this just because at a really important moment when he needed trimming to open up his heels and get the function going at that formative age, he didn't get it, and the hooves have just totally contracted. So it can be genetic, and Claire, his owner, is 100%, 110%, 150% on board with my recommendations, and she's excellent. I can't fault her there, and her plan is to bring him, her other stallion, and the mare home where they can get more movement every day. So here I'm just dealing with his impacted bar. He had impacted bar forward of the apex of the frog, so I took that off, and that's really tricky because you want to take off bar if it's sitting in front of frog apex, but not trim into the toe callus when you do that, and that's quite tricky. So now I'm nipping. You're seeing the last day I used this pair of nippers because 2 days ago I had a new pair of nippers arrive, and they're one-handed nippers, so I can kind of go nip, nip, nip with one hand all the way around. You notice I'm nipping on not a totally flat, but slightly angled position, and I increase that angle at the toe, not quite to the angle of the bevel, but just shy of the angle of the bevel at the toe. And then I make that angle more shallow at the quarters and more shallow still at the heel. Same logic as your rasp work, but just under the ultimate angle you would if you were working with a rasp. He's getting pretty good with his leg handling. Some trimmers sort of go around and in one fell swoop cut a halo off with nippers. I don't like to work this way because, well, I don't work with metal and I don't work with the techniques associated with metal, and I prefer to measure twice, 3 times and cut once with nippers because, you know, they are the most invasive trim tool, and once you've trimmed it off, can't put it back. So here I'm working gently on his bar. I'm very conservative with my bar trim. Here I'm just opening up central sulcus and some excessive material that's sitting back there in the heel, and working through the collateral grooves, opening the collateral grooves, peeling the frog like you would peel a carrot or a potato, just to expose anything that might be laying onto the collateral grooves in order to stop thrush from forming. Now I'm doing a little bit of open heel and ramping bar there with my bar and sole rasp, just to kind of work on that buttress slightly, and I decided there's enough there that I can nip. Despite having crushed heels, his heels aren't short. He's very flat-footed, but his heels are actually long. They're not short. This is a misconception when you're looking at the profile of the foot and you see a very low heel. Well, the heel might not necessarily be short. He's got very long heels. They're just crushed and folded under the hoof and into the frog. So actually you need to trim back here to get live heel. There's a little bit of open heel there going into perimeter rasp at the quarter, building up that platform at the heel buttress. There was a little bit of bar bevel, which on horses like him I'm going to be a bit more extreme with, because I want to angle the trim at the bar, that it angles in towards the frog, so that when ground makes contact with that part of the bar, it is angled as such that it pushes the heels and heel quarters away from the frog and opening up the heel. That's why I sort of trimmed there into the bar slightly. Here now I'm balancing on the outside, a little bit of perimeter rasp there. Blending that at the toe, just kind of smoothing that off slightly at the toe. So this is a little bit flat to standing. That's again back to open heel with perimeter rasp. You'll notice I'm swapping between techniques pretty rapidly. I go from one to the other, according to what my eye notices at each time. And usually, as soon as I notice something with my eye, I like to dive straight in and do something to it. I don't like to delay. As soon as my eye sees something, I go in there and I make a correction. So I've noticed that instead of going in with the rasp to do his bevel today, especially because of his extremely long toes, I'm going to go in there and take, 1/3, 2/3 of the way into the bevel with the nippers. Because of the length of his toe, I'm cutting 2/3 into the white line at the toe. Not quite all the way, sorry, let me say that again. I'm cutting 2/3 of the way into the inner wall, right? If the inner wall is split into thirds, I'm taking the outermost 2/3 of the inner wall at the toe and gradiating that more gently back towards heel quarter. I'm not cutting directly into the white line at his toe because his toe callus is so precious, it is so thin and difficult to develop in this horse. I'm taking as much at the toe as I dare whilst staying well clear of the toe callus. Measure twice, cut once. Measure twice, cut once with nippers. Swapping for my Evo rasp here because I've noticed something there on that bar. I need to angle that bar so that it spreads the heel quarter out when he makes contact with it. Oh, he needs the leg back. Very good. He's a really good boy. And for a stallion, he's got fantastic manners. He's very well behaved. He's very calm and relaxed, generally speaking, when I'm trimming him. So here you can kind of see that wave I'm building in the heel when I sort of put you in at this angle. Because he has long heels, but they're crushed. So I need to reshape them and actually trim them down. It's kind of counterintuitive. And there again, I'm going in with my knife. You can kind of see my body position here. He's on my knee. And I'm trying to keep my elbows as close to my body as possible so I can get the maximum amount of leverage with my tool. Swapping again to my Cody James rasp. Very nice, he's a good boy. Now here, I'm doing something that might be very counterintuitive to people. I'm actually rasping on both the heel buttress and the bar. Not lowering it, I'm absolutely not lowering it. I'm just stimulating miles of wear. So this horse doesn't get an opportunity to move freely in a large paddock. He's got a really good sized corral that's very clean and dry, but he doesn't get to freely roam, you know, that minimum 2-3 kilometers a day. So I have to stimulate that wear on his feet. Again, imagine he's like someone who's been in a wheelchair his whole life and the feet need sort of regular physiotherapy, the legs need physiotherapy to get moving, stimulating movement, simulating movement even. So that's a bit of finishing backwards there. There was a bit of flat standing there as well. Notice when I pick the leg up, I always give him a chance to shift the weight off the leg before I pick it up. Heel bevel. Blending. Blending, blending, blending. This is all blending. Blending the techniques together. Heel bevel. Blending. Blending. It's like finishing from above, but on the knee rather than the stand. So that was actually his trim completed on the front, and I took a few minutes just to chat there with the livery owner. And now I'm doing some hoof armor application. Got the gloves on, got the gun out, and I'm just going to apply it to the caudal portion of his hoof because again I want the shape and balancing that I've done here to maintain, and I want him to retain strength in the caudal hoof, and I want him to start wearing the toes more on his own. So less is more with hoof armor, and you've got to work quickly. So just put a little dab there, starting on the heel buttress, and then with my hands, gloved hands, I'm going to work it in. I'm also putting it in his central sulcus and collateral grooves, which you are permitted to do according to the manufacturer, and it does kill bacteria, Fucibacterium necrophorum. It does kill it. Notice I'm touching the toes there, but none of the product is really actively getting onto the toes. I'm just doing it caudal portion of the hoof and the quarters because that's where he needs the most strength. That's why I'm applying the hoof armor. And I don't want it to be globbed up in any kind of thick layer anywhere. Less is more with Hufama. Less is more, so I'm really thinning it out there. And now instead of using a powder, I'm going to use the dirt from the stable floor. They say you have to use a talcum powder or flour. I was using bentonite powder, but the dirt from the stable floor here is absolutely sufficient, just to put a powdered layer on the top to stop the product from peeling off on any footing he might come in contact with. And done. Done. Done on this hoof. Active trim time was about 15 minutes on the first hoof, but of course, because I was taking breaks, it was probably about 20 minutes, 22 minutes trim on the first hoof. So that's about as fast as I like to take it. The slower I trim, the better I trim. That's just what I've found. There's the legs of the livery owner there, and conversations that happen between farriers and livery owners during appointments are under a seal of confidentiality. So I told her that we could talk freely and I would take the sound out later, because we're talking about all kinds of stuff. People we know, stories we've had, problems we've had, successes we've had. We really sort of get there and chit chat. And that's one of the great parts about being a hoof care provider, is that it's sort of undemanding time spent with horse owners and people who take care of horses. I mean, it's demanding for me, but it's not demanding for them. You kind of chit chat a little bit like a hairdresser would, I can say. All right, so done the first left front. Now I'm doing right front. Starting in to see if any of that impacted bar will come away with my nippers. Kind of awkward. Let's see if any of it will. So I got out my bonsai nippers because the big nippers weren't able to get in there to those deep places. And my bonsai nippers, which are angled and beveled, enable me to do that. So it's enabling me to get out some of that impacted bar so I can not have to gouge so much with my knife, and enabling me to get out a little bit of frog as well. First time I saw you, I was so nervous to talk. Happened so fast, went from so lonely to falling asleep in your arms. I used to be afraid to fall in love. My past relationship was a disaster, but now I don't care. At this angle, you can really see that light bulb shape. Pinched heels, flared quarters, and a hoof that's running forwards. And because we now know that sole sort of develops in the heel and actually migrates forward rather than growing straight down from the top, the longer your toes are, the thinner your sole's going to be, because all of that material is getting stretched into an excessive and pathological form. It'll be stretched into the quarters, it'll be stretched into the toe. So I'm first trying to get out any kind of impacted bar that's over the top of that sole. Then I'll start to deal with the toes and toe quarters. I get too caught up in all of the wrong things, but you're always there to guide me. I used to be afraid to fall in love. A past relationship was a disaster, but now I
'Cause you took my scars, bruises and broken heart, and numbed all the pain. Show me how to heal, and now I don't feel.
So when I'm using my knife, it's really a two-handed job for me, especially when the hooves are as dry and hard as these are, because these hooves are quite hard. So it's a two-handed job, and I keep my hands close to the knife with good protective gloves on, and I'm lifting my hands off for a microsecond to get a visual peek at what I just did each step of the way. Like crumb by crumb, following the trail. So he's got his weight on that foot now. Understandably, he feels a little uncomfortable at this point of the trim because I'm working on the heels, which is making them feel different and angled different, and yet the toe is still the same length, so his weight is going to be even more exaggeratedly uncomfortable until I can get that toe where it needs to be. In here with the bonsai nippers. Once again, same process as the other foot.
First time I saw you, I was so nervous to talk. Happened so fast, went from so lonely to falling asleep in your arms. I used to be afraid to fall in love. My past relationship was a disaster, but now I don't care. 'Cause you took my scars, bruises and broken heart, numbed all the pain. Show me how to heal, and now I don't feel broken anymore. Still got your smell wrapped in my bed sheets. Don't wanna wash it away. I know sometimes I get too caught up in all of the wrong things, but you're always there to guide me. I used to be afraid to fall in love. A past relationship.
So this hoof was a little bit worse off than the left front, and the entire caudal portion of the hoof required total renovation, which I'm just sort of reaching the end of the major structural changes in the heels now, so I'm able to get there to the toes so I can start getting him seriously comfortable. And you'll notice that I'm sort of not holding the foot up for longer than 45 seconds to a minute each lift. This is to give him plenty of time to relax. See, he just big lick and chew there after that half of a toe gone. Big lick and chew, and that feels a bit better. Let's see if he gives it a little easier this time. And he does. Good. It's the toes he really needs to work on. For his comfort, but for his long-term hoof development, it's the heels which are most important. Caudal portion of the hoof, so that includes anything in the back half of the foot. And here I'm trimming, just before the white line at an angle just shy of a bevel, because I can always take more before I go in with my rasp. Already that looks better. You know, he had about an inch of toe that came off. In we go with the rasp. Sort of starting on the toe pillars, which is the junction between toe and toe quarter first, just to kind of gauge and see how much toe quarter, heel quarter, mid hoof there is to remove, how much flare there really is there. Again, as he gets more tired, so do the lifts get shorter.
Past relationship was a disaster, but now I don't care. 'Cause you took my scars, bruises and broken heart, numbed all the pain. Show me how.
I try to keep his hoof as stable as I can and in sort of the same position in the air as much as I can, just so that he can get confident about knowing that I will try as much as I can to hold it steady, and the hoof's not suddenly going to go into a new position he hasn't balanced or allowed for yet. That's quite important to me, and it means I don't have to move my eye so much to kind of gauge the trim. The more steady the hoof is, the better my trim can be. So here I'm kind of working on mid hoof there with a bit of perimeter rasp into open heel, into a little bit of bevel, but with the rasped flipped. And a little bit of finishing backwards there on the inside.
A past relationship was a disaster, but now I don't care. 'Cause you took my scars, bruises and broken heart, numbed all the pain. Show me.
So decided to start the bevel properly with nipping this time, so I don't have to spend so much time rasping. That was half the foot. So I do like 2 passes at the nip here. One was a provisional, just to kind of get the toe out of the way, and the second one sets up the bevel so I can rasp less. And now the inside, focusing on the outer wall now.
Until I met you, I was insecure, caught up in the pain, but you showed me how to heal. Took my scars, bruises and broken heart, numbed all the pain. Show me how to heal, and I still recall the first time I saw you. I was so close to touch. Happened so fast, went from so lonely to fond of staying. Show me how to heal, and you used to be afraid of falling back. Don't feel a past relationship was a disaster, but now I don't care. 'Cause you took my scars, bruises and broken heart, numbed all the pain. Show me how to heal, and now I don't feel broken anymore. Still got your smell wrapped in my bed sheets. Don't wanna wash it away. I know sometimes I get too caught up in all of the wrong things, but you're always there to guide me.
So here I noticed, right towards the end of the trim, that I need to get that bar bevel. I need to get that angle on the bar to help pressurize the heel quarters and buttresses to flare away from the frog when they receive ground contact. So I just touched that up there slightly. And probably I'm going to smooth out a little bit more, maybe stimulate some wear on the frog. Yes, these are the final touches. The trim doesn't start to look good until the final sort of 2 minutes. And for the rest of the trim, you're allowed to have the hoof look like a bit of a mess, like a kitchen that you tore it apart before you cleaned it up. So I edited out a conversation I had with livery manager, and in I go with some hoof armor. Again, same idea, caudal portion of the hoof only, and I'm only doing it on his fronts because his hinds are in a much better way. Less is more. Little bits there and there and there. Starting on the heels and blending it out into the rest of the hoof, staying away from the toe. This is his first hoof armor application. He's had none before me, and I'm really curious to see how he goes. And I plan to see him in 4 weeks' time. So I'm recording this and editing this video a week after the trim. Almost a week after the trim. No, today's Friday and I was there last Friday. So this is 1 week after the trim. And I will hopefully be out to see him again in 4 weeks' time. So that's a 5-week trim cycle, which is as long as I would ever really prefer to take a trim, especially on horses that aren't getting miles of wear on the hoof. And notice again, I used sort of the dusty stuff there on the ground as the sealant and protectant for the hoof armor while it's curing. All right, now we're moving on to Taco's hinds.
Cause you took my scars, bruises and broken heart, and numbed all the pain. Show me how to heal, and now I don't feel broken anymore. I used to be afraid until I met you. I was insecure, caught up in the pain, but you showed me how to heal. Took my
So you can already maybe notice on his hinds that the heels, although still somewhat contracted, we don't have that exaggerated light bulb shape, and they are a great deal healthier than the fronts. We have a little bit more juice in his frog, a little bit more function going on in his form. So I felt comfortable going straight into dealing with his toes here and leaving mostly his heels alone in this scenario, mostly. Maybe stimulate a little bit of wear, reshape slightly, but mostly I can leave it alone. So when he loses his balance or his concentration, I don't worry about that. And I don't get after him, and I don't get concerned because I have all the time in the world for my clients. And my clients are the horses, because they have all the time in the world to get this done.
I know that you were having trouble believing right now. everything is gonna be alright. I know that you feel all alone in this world, but you have to put your trust into us, and we will help you through, 'cause we only want what's best, what is best for you. I know that you are having a hard time right now, that everything seems to crumble around you. I know that you feel all alone in this world, but you have to put your trust into us, and we will help. I know that you through, 'cause we only want in this world, but you have to put your trust into us, and we will help you through, 'cause we only want what's best, what's best. I know that you are having trouble believing right now for you. What is best, everything is gonna be.
So that's all I'm doing on this hind. He's got a little bit more material on his medial midhoof, medial quarters, but I've decided he's probably compensating for something for a good reason there, and I'm just trimming it back into a good position, but not doing any major renovations on his hinds. I did a big renovation on his fronts, and I don't want to do that to his hinds this trim as well. So that was it on the right hind, and now moving in to left hind, which is in a similar state. So we can see way too much wall, so I'm going straight in for that. And we can see a little bit of impacted sole and bar as well, but generally a much healthier frog and caudal hoof that actually looks like it can do something there. So straight in with my nippers which are totally dead. This is their last trim of their life. They're going in the bin now.
I know that you feel all alone in this world, but you have to put your trust into us, and we will help you through, 'cause we only want what's best for you. For you. What is best for you. For you. I know that you are having a hard time right now.
So he's slightly high with the heels and slightly crushed forward, so I'm simulating miles of wear there with an angled rasp in towards the frog on the inside of the buttress and bar junction, which is bar bevel, right? Which is indicated with the red triangle in the markups. And this is something I'm finding myself doing more and more frequently lately, especially on horses with caudal hoof dysfunction. Really going in there to get the heels opening up. Now that's bevel, which you're all familiar with. Focusing on outer wall and just blending out the nip marks and making sure I've done as a balanced job as I can. With plenty of rest stops for taco, plenty of them.
That everything is gonna be alright. I know that you feel all alone in this world, but you have to put your trust into us, and we will help you through, 'cause we only want what's best, what is best for you.
And so, coming to the end of his trim here, just by a little bit of flat to standing extra on the toe, and I'm pretty satisfied with that. If you have any questions about this trim, just reach out. I'm an open book.